Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 7th, 2023. As death and destruction continues to define the situation in Gaza, Israeli officials are engaged in a self-congratulation. They brag that only 2 civilians are killed for every Hamas member they kill. For them, that's not only an acceptable ratio, but a cause for great cheering. Now, UN officials are referring to the situation in Gaza as apocalyptic. Some are making the mistake of appealing to Netanyahu and his government, which includes extremists who have openly called for expelling the Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank for years. But every day we're seeing horrible photos of children who are the victims in the thousands of the Israeli attack. We see grieving brothers and sisters, weeping mothers and fathers. The same scene every day for 60 days in Gaza and the West Bank. And we've seen the same among Israelis, brothers, sisters, mothers, and papas weeping over the victims of this ongoing clash. Now, if you feel your heart breaking, that's a good sign because it shows you're human. It shows that you haven't become desensitized to the killing. But the intent of the mainstream media and of the governments is to prepare you for more killing to come, more destruction, rather than change the policies which have led to these catastrophes. So we have to ask ourselves, how did it come to this? It didn't start on October 7th. There have been decades of attacks and counterattacks, demands for revenge, for killing, for people left weeping over the graves of family members. And it's followed by pointing fingers at each side, and it's been conducted by both sides. Now, who benefits from this? Is this something that's good for the people of Israel, for the people of Palestine? Is there any benefit to them from these wars? Not from the average person, but take a step back and ask yourself, who benefits from this century of war? Now, we have someone who is an insider, a member of the board of Raytheon, a former top official of the U.S. military, who's now the U.S. Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin. How is it that someone who served on the board of Raytheon, a leading defense contractor, becomes the defense secretary? Well, that's a question for another day. But Austin gave a speech on December 2nd at the Reagan National Defense Forum and said the following: America must not waver. He argued that sticking to the course means we have to pass the $106 billion supplemental budget, which would provide over $60 billion worth of new arms and weapons and funding to Ukraine in its proxy war against Russia, and $14 billion to Israel for its war to exterminate Hamas, on top of the $3.8 billion they get every year. And he said what's necessary is not just the supplemental budget, but to pass a full year appropriation to, quote, strengthen our national defense, to help fund our national security needs, to stand by our partners in danger, and to invest in our defense industrial base. When you listen to people in the Pentagon and in the various executive agencies making the argument for more funding, they're using this term increasingly, defense industrial base. Perhaps they're saying that because the idea of the military-industrial complex is so despised and so recognized as the excuse for passing billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars to corrupt and greedy corporations for the purpose of not wavering. Now, the conference where he spoke, the Reagan National Defense Forum, was sponsored by a who's who of the military-industrial complex: Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and some of the newcomers from the tech sector, Palantir and Microsoft. And they are, of course, committed to this policy of geopolitical confrontation because that's their bread and butter. And who pays for it? You, the taxpayer. You pay for it not just from your taxes, but from money that's diverted from going into necessary programs, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's salaries for policemen, firemen, teachers. This is where we see the money going instead to killing and maiming children and young people in Ukraine and in Gaza, and with the intent to extend the wars to Iran and to China. Now, as this is going on, there's an international mobilization that's gathering strength to stop the war, to have a ceasefire. And we're seeing meetings and summits. Putin just met with leaders of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. There are all kinds of organizations that are discussing the question of how do you get a ceasefire and what would be the alternative. There are resolutions put forward. There are marches. There are reports that the Arab group at the United Nations is drafting a new ceasefire resolution to be presented to the UN Security Council. Well, this has happened before, and each time the U.S. vetoed it, which means the U.S. stands as a partner with Israel and is complicit in the ongoing attack, to its shame and to the shame of every American who remains silent in the face of this ongoing genocide. Now, Biden on December 5th echoed what Austin said when he said on December 2nd, on December 5th, he echoed what Austin had said 3 days earlier, that Russia could invade a NATO country after a possible victory in Ukraine. Well, first of all, it's not a possible victory. Ultimately, there will be a Russian victory in Ukraine because the whole idea of confronting Russia with Ukrainian military funded and backed by NATO and the United States was an absurd conception to begin with. But secondly, there's no evidence or no indication that the reason Putin is in Ukraine is because he wants to take over Europe. He tried for 8 years to get security guarantees, not just for his country and people, but for Ukraine. And who rejected it? The United States. So the question is Biden so trapped in this world of geopolitics in the 20th century, in the new Cold War, that he can't see how the United States is isolating itself as a new era is beginning, a new era of cooperation and peace, which has the United States not as a partner, but as an enemy. Well, is it the case that the U.S. must never waver, even when it's clear that its policies are wrong, dead wrong? Have we refused to learn from our past mistakes? Maybe that's why people say Biden is too old, although oftentimes as people age, they realize that they were wrong and they make amends for what they did in the past. President Biden, if you are capable, be a Mench. Break with this mindless policy of continuing the wars. Come into the 21st century. Acknowledge your errors in Ukraine and now Gaza. And reach out your hand to Russia, to China, to nations of the global south, and bring with you the nations of Europe. In fact, it's the United States, Canada, and Europe where people are paying the price for these foolish wars. With the high prices in energy, the collapse of the physical economy, the wild swings in stock markets and value of currencies and so on. We're seeing the end of an era. Wake up and join us. We need a permanent ceasefire now, not permanent war. So Biden, be a Mench, not a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex, for the evil murderers who now call themselves the great heroes of the battle to defend democracy and freedom. Tomorrow is Friday, so I'll take your questions and comments. Please send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and weekly magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.